With the rise of Kenny Pickett this preseason, do you think that Mitchell Trubisky should be worried about his starting job when it comes to week one with the Steelers?
I'm not going to say week one. I think that Pittsburgh is a very conservative organization, and by that I mean they're very traditional. Mitchell hasn't done anything to lose the job necessarily, although Kenny has been overshadowing Mason Rudolph. Although Kenny has shown enough flashes to skip Rudolph in the depth chart already, does show a lot of promise. But I believe until Mitchell does something to lose it, it's going to be his job to lose specifically. Uh, Now, with that being said, I'm not going to go out here and say that if Mitchell Trubisky has one bad game, he'll get pulled. But if he continues to make mistakes, if Pittsburgh isn't winning, or if you combine those two factors, I think that his leash will be pretty short in terms of how long Mike Tomlin will leave him out before he gives the rookie a gamble. But I think at the end of the day, Kenny Pickett's got a kind of confidence. He's the hometown kid, 4-year starter at Pitt. He played in this stadium for 4 years, as I had just said. So it's not like he's a stranger. It's not like the crowd is against him. It's not like he isn't a fan favorite as it is. And of course, he's got a little bit of a swagger to him, the way that he does things. So I would say Mitchell definitely needs to keep an eye over his shoulder, because if he makes the faintest mistake, if he loses them a game, we all know that Pittsburgh crowd does not tolerate failure. You go and try to replace Ben Roethlisberger. Those are big shoes to fill in and of itself. And to say that Mitchell Trubisky is the guy that's going to do it, I don't really think so. I think the Steelers got their guy when Kenny Pickett fell to where they needed him to fall. They got him in the first round, albeit later pick, but they felt that he was the best man for the job. And I think that Mitchell Trubisky does has something to worry about for sure.
I think it's definitely fair to say that Kenny Pickett has had a solid start to his early NFL career in these first two preseason games. I mean, going back to the first one when they were playing against the Seahawks, I mean, I don't think there's a better way to start your preseason campaign by throwing the game winning touchdown, essentially at the last second, to get Pittsburgh the win against the Seahawks in that first matchup of the preseason. And then to follow it up against the Jaguars, granted, he didn't get the majority of the snaps in that second game for the quarterback position against the Jags, but in the limited time that he was in, I thought he was still pretty viable, and he still ended up throwing a touchdown in that limited time frame against the Jags. All in all, I think it's fair to say that I think Mitchell's going to be the week one starter, and he could be I guess, the starter for the foreseeable future until he makes a mistake. But I have to kind of give some credit to Kenny Pickett here. I don't think a lot of people were expecting him to get, this amount of attention this early on. But the way that he started out, I think that's something that we have to consider at some point. Because let's face it, if Kenny Pickett were to be the week one starter for the Steelers, I think that would be rushing it. This is not a situation where it was kind of, let's take this for example. The Patriots were faced with a situation between Cam Newton and Mac Jones. They ended up going with Mac Jones. And it was simply just because I don't think Cam was going to fit their style of offense that they wanted to run last year. And Mac was, I think, the way that they wanted to go with into last season. And going into year two, I think it might serve him well just based on the 1 year tenure of being the starting quarterback for the Patriots. Now, when it comes to Kenny Pickett, Kenny might be a little bit different than what Mac had with his situation, just because I think the Steelers actually have some decent talent at the quarterback position. Because let's face it, Mitchell's probably going to be the week one starter. And then people forget that Mason Rudolph is on this team, unless you're a Steelers fan. And Mason Rudolph, throughout this entire preseason, has played extremely well. When we look back to the second preseason game against the Jags, he got most of the reps at the quarterback position, and he did relatively well. If I remember the stats correctly, he went 17 and 21, threw for over 100 yards, and had a touchdown as well. I know Kenny Pickett's getting a lot of shine because he's the new kid on the block, coming straight from Pitt, and definitely has something to prove. But you have to understand that Kenny Pickett is going up against guys that are, let's face it, second, third string players, and he's not necessarily what I would go up. It's not something that I would necessarily describe as top tier talent yet. Now, if he continues to play at this level, I think that Kenny could definitely kind of work his way to being the official backup to Mitchell. But I'm still of the mindset. Granted, I know that the reports have stated that Kenny's kind of jumped into that second spot on the quarterback depth chart. I'm not convinced of that yet, just because Mason Rudolph, to me, still has the NFL experience, and as a veteran that Kenny Pickett does not have yet. If Kenny were to take that backup spot this early on, and that actually be the case when the season starts, I got to give Kenny a lot of credit if that ends up being true once the season starts. But I'm still of the mindset that Kenny's probably still a little behind the eight ball just because he hasn't gone up against NFL, what I would say real NFL talent yet. But overall, his rise is definitely something to note. And Kevin, I'm in full agreement with you. Mitchell's definitely got to be wary of Kenny's rise, because if Mitchell does tend to fall off here, going into a couple weeks into the regular season, it wouldn't surprise me if Kenny gets some looks, at possibly even practice of getting some starting reps in, and then potentially even some starting game reps. So overall, I'm still of the mindset that Mitchell's going to be the week one starter, but Kenny's having a fantastic start to his rookie campaign, and it may translate into being the starter one day. I just don't think that day is here yet. So I'm going to just kind of leave it at that.